Hello. Today I wanted to talk about how I get myself ready to set up a new Linux environment. Uh, Let me start off this is not a bash against Windows or Mac, or a fanboy Linux video. It's you decide what operating system will fit the needs that you need to do what your daily tasks are for. I've been a Mac user for 5 years now. I switched from Linux to Mac. That is due to my job. It required me to run some software that at the time there was no real compatibility in the Linux world. I've been in the Mac world for 5 years. Last year, I went ahead and bought a new MacBook Pro. At the time, I thought a 128 gig hard drive would be enough for me. Finding out now that I need to run several VMs, some of them running some old ASP.NET code, they can get pretty big and will not fit on that 128 gig hard drive. And as some may know, with a lot of Mac, or actually all Mac computers pretty much today, there is no way to swap out the hardware. So when you buy it, you have to know what you're doing for the next several years, or be ready to purchase new laptops, every year. Probably could have went an external hard drive route, but decided not to because I didn't want to have to carry a big hunky, hard drive with me. If I had to pick up my laptop and go to another desk, I didn't want to have to carry, a USB drive connected into my computer all the time. I kind of did some research and, decided that maybe it was time to go back into the Linux world. So, I've been seeing a lot, throughout the years of this System 76, this, company that, you can buy a laptop that has Ubuntu installed on it by default, or aka Linux. So I've always wanted to do that. So I thought, well, since I needed to buy a machine, I decided to go through these guys because the one benefit that I see is seen from here is that the RAM and hard drive are upgradable. So if in a year or two, you know technology requires us to have 32 gigs of RAM or 50 gigs of RAM, this laptop will support it. But enough of that. I just wanted to kind of bring this video on to kind of maybe for people who are, new to Linux, or kind of decided that, I want to go the Linux route. And how can I do some research? Or, what do other users do to kind of get everything, prepared on their existing hardware, either be Windows or Mac. So, the first thing that, I did is, I've used this site a lot, alternative to .NET. It's a very good website for looking up applications and seeing some alternatives. And some of the alternatives are for different operating systems. So I can come here, I can click on Linux, and these are just showing me some, the Linux apps, but I can go in here and do a search. So, let's say, I'm a Photoshop user. That's what I use in Windows or my Mac. Well, what are some of the, Windows alternatives? Now, sometimes you can take your Windows apps, if your, existing architecture is Windows, you can run it in an emulator called Wine or Play on Linux. But if you can't, what are some of the alternatives to, to that? Am I going to be in trouble? Because again, if you can't run that system, that software that you need, you're just going to get frustrated with what you need to do. So you'll definitely want to go through your list of installed apps on your system and go through here and check to see if there are Linux versions to it. And if they're not, look at some of these alternatives. Now, sometimes looking at screenshots are not good. You can go to YouTube videos for some of these and look up, how to use GIMP or whatever and kind of see people use that. what I did is I basically, on my Windows machine or, my Mac, I would install something like VirtualBox, and I would install a version of Linux, and I would try some of these apps that I thought maybe would be for me. Or you can try emulating through, like I said, Wine or Play on Linux for your existing apps and see if they install and see if they work. It's a good way because guess what? If you try this out and you say, you know what, I don't think Linux is going to be it for this time, you can always delete your VM and move on. Because when you delete your hard drive and you install Linux, you're going to lose your Windows, data. So, you know, you want to make sure. So, I've seen some people actually run Linux in a VM all the time and keep Windows installed. That's definitely an alternative. But if you notice that you're working mostly out of the VM and not out of the host OS, then maybe it's time to dual boot or replace it with Linux. So after you've kind of gone through that, what you're going to want to do is back up your existing photos, Word documents, PDFs. I use Dropbox for most of, or pretty much all of that. I use Google Photos for most of my photos, so they're all uploaded into the cloud. But you want to make sure that you back up that data. You could use a USB drive at this point or Thunderbolt drive to back up that data. So once that's all backed up, you're ready to go. Now, as a developer, there are a lot of developer tools that you use. Node, maybe you use Ruby, so you have gems. So how do you get your environment? So once I install Linux, how do I get things configured? A long time ago, I learned that a lot of people would use GitHub for this to back up their configuration files for certain things. So like their vimrc, their nginx, or their Apache config. They would create this .files project in GitHub and just put them in there, and then when they would set up a new system, they would clone this repo and manually move the files over. About a few months ago, I ran into a video from Nisi that was talking about how to use Vim as your IDE. But through that video, I went ahead and looked at his .file setup, and I noticed he did something different. He actually created a shell script that he could, after he would clone his repo, he could run the shell script that would not only move the configuration files where they needed to be or symlink them, he also installed applications. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So I went ahead and, followed that architecture. Now, I didn't copy his repo because I don't use everything he uses. Usually you don't do that. So I went ahead and I set this up. And at the time, I was running Mac, so I had this built to specifically work with Mac. Well, now that I'm using Linux, I'm starting to turn this into checking, am I running Linux or am I running Mac? So this now will work on my Mac, and this will also work on my Linux. I've also in the past had this set up to also work with Cygwin for Windows, but that's not, of course, in here. So I would recommend that you kind of set this up because it just to make things easier. And maybe when you're setting, if you don't have this, use your Linux install to start building this and copy and do this. But take a look at and I'll put in the show notes a link to Nick Nisi's GitHub URL. I'll put a link to this. Just kind of look and see what people have done, and just take the bits and pieces of what you need. But get this set up because there will be times where you have to reinstall your operating system. And one of the nice things is when that happens, all I have to do in Linux is install Git and an application called Xclip, And then I'm able to go, and if I look at install here and I look at Arch, because that's the Linux OS that I chose, it's going to go and install everything that I need after my install is done and I reboot and I'm in, my user mode. This will install everything I need, so then I just hit a command, I go and, go get something to drink, go spend some time with the family, come back in a few minutes, and my environment's already configured, ready to go. It has all those installed apps. So this is a living thing, and as you add apps or remove apps, you're going to do that. So it's not like I've built this once and never touched it. There's times where I have Ruby backend. When I first started this, I had Ruby. I stopped doing Ruby. I pulled Ruby out of it, but now I'm getting back into Ruby, so now I pulled it back in. So that's where to go. That's what I've kind of gone, and you kind of have to build your way. And I hope this kind of gives you some ideas of how you can build a solution and get yourself ready. If you have any questions, any comments, put them below, and I'll try to respond to those. Thank you.